Hi there. Welcome to Stories, a podcast by Acadium where we focus on the stories of our incredible users. People come to Acadium for a few different reasons. They might be looking to build new skills, whether that's for a career change or just to deepen their craft, or they might be looking to get some eager extra hands on their project or business. In any case, people come to Acadium to grow, and we find that our users often have amazing stories to tell about their journeys, and we're here to share them. Our guest today is Doug Dvorak. Doug is the CEO of DMG International, an organization that assists clients with productivity training and motivational excellence management workshops. Doug's clients are characterized as Fortune 1000 companies and small to medium-sized businesses. Doug has earned an international reputation for his powerful educational methods and motivational techniques, as well as his experience in all levels of sales and sales management. I really enjoyed my conversation with Doug today. We talked about the role of traditional education versus online courses in this changing world, the role that humor plays in some of Doug's speeches. He's a bit of a comedian, and he likes to work humor into some of his speeches to engage his audience and keep things light. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Enjoy. Okay, Doug, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Graham. It's an honor and privilege to be with you in the Acadium world. Thank you.
You as well. As I mentioned before the podcast, I enjoyed sort of digging through your website and checking out your past. I think you've got a really interesting career, and I'm looking forward to asking you some questions and actually just learning some more about you for myself. But I also think it'll be really interesting to a lot of our listeners. For the people listening today, whereabouts in the world are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from the metropolis of Donnelly, Idaho, in the mountains of southwestern Idaho, population 163.
Wow. Okay, so maybe not much of a metropolis, but I'm sure that's a beautiful place to be spending your time.
It is my bad attempts at humor, but yes, I'm in south central Idaho.
Awesome. And humor is a topic that I picked up on through looking through your resume and some of your speeches. I'd love to get into that a little bit later. I've got some questions, but if we could dial back the clock, just to sort of build up the story here. You started your career in sales. You run Sales Coaching Institute now. I know that you speak a lot about sales to different organizations. How did you make the decision back in the day to start your career in sales?
Well, really, the decision was made for me. My dad was a professional sales representative. He sold automobiles. He then worked his way up and worked for manufacturers such as Fiat and Toyota. And I was an only child, so I'd travel in the summers with my dad. And he was just a great salesman and a great guy. So I had an affinity for it. And I remember when I was about 10 years old, I was a Cub Scout, and I had to sell Scout-O-Rama tickets. And I sold 4 huge booklets, and it was sort of like, wow, this is amazing. Your dad sells, you've been around kind of sort of, the sales world with your father, and now you've experienced some success. So I knew at a very early age that I wanted to be a professional salesperson. I knew I had to get my education, but right out of school, I started selling cars and started selling professionally. So that desire, that hunger, that appeal really was really ingrained for me from an early age.
I hear people talk a lot about sales being such a great platform for training people in the world of business, just generally. People talk about it as this constant. It's a skill that's always going to be important and always going to be valuable. I don't know if that rings true for you. If it does, I'd love to hear you speak a little bit about that. But more specifically, can you unpack what you learned personally being a professional salesperson earlier on in your career that helped you throughout the rest of your career, some of those skills that you found to be really important?
I think the foundation is you've got to have a resilient and positive attitude because of the sheer volumes of rejection that you receive. Every no potentially might lead to a maybe or a yes, but having a very strong motivational attitude, and really reading and with every fiber of your being ingesting some motivational material every day, because just the sheer volume of rejection one receives in sales. So motivation, and then following a sales process or a sales skills program. For me, when I started, I read some of the books that were really impactful for me in the mid 80s. Were probably the best book on human relations ever, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. You can buy that for $1 or $2 used on eBay now. That was the first book. um, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. So those are the three books I would suggest for anyone getting into sales today. Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill; How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie; and The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. They're 50, 75 years old, but those concepts are still as germane today to be successful in selling. And then I would say get some selling skills. However, there's no greater time to get ostensibly a free sales education through Coursera. Many of the institutions of higher learning in the States and in Canada, University of Toronto, a lot of the universities offer free sales training courses, and the barriers to entry are virtually nothing. So I'd say focus on a good foundation of motivation, then get some selling skills. And the one skill that nobody can teach that is a requirement for success in selling is desire to win, high achievement drive.
You mentioned this idea of rejection and also sort of the power of positive thinking. Some of the wisdom that I think gets dished out a lot from people who are a little bit later on in their careers and have had some success is the importance of failure and the mindset that you can have around failure. To what extent do you think sales teaches you or can teach you the importance of that failure through continuous rejection if you have that ability to frame it positively?
If you have the ability to frame it positively, I think you can learn from every situation. In sales leadership in organizations, they have a process called a win-loss review. So when you win a deal, let's review it and see why we won it, and practice those habits and skills more to win more deals. Conversely, when we lose a deal, when we fail, why did we fail? As the sales rep, as the sales leader, or as the team on that new business approach. But I think really looking at those failures and not staying stuck in the failures, but using those for a springboard for success in sales. But also, a lot of the CEOs today that are leading organizations started in sales, and then they went to other functional areas, accounting, HR, and but selling is a great profession. It's an honorable profession, and it's a springboard to other levels of directorships, VPs, or even a CEO. Because there's an old adage in selling, Graham: nothing happens in any organization until somebody sells something.
One other thing that you touched on was these free courses that are offered over the internet. And this is something that we think about a lot at Acadium. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the role that you think those courses play. And it could be specific to sales or just more generally. And then similarly, the role that you see post-secondary playing. The reason I ask the question is because I think that a lot of young people right now are, especially with what's going on in the world with COVID-19 and people sort of having their idea of post-secondary education being turned on its head, they're having to go remote. They're sort of asking themselves, okay, well, what's the difference here? If I choose to go to university, or if I just choose to carve my own path with these free or maybe paid but cheap courses over the internet, do you see these online courses playing a similar or the same role to post-secondary, or do you still see kind of a distinct place for both?
I think there's a distinct place for both, but I believe that higher ed worldwide is being disrupted in ways that we can't even imagine. Not just because of COVID, but because if you look at the younger generation, in the last 10 years, they've gone through two economic disasters: 2008, 2009, the Great Recession, and now COVID. They've not been able to, if they've come out of school with 50,000 or 100,000 in debt, and they're not employed in the profession they went to school for, that's an issue. So I think, one, really be mindful of the debt that you incur for a college or university degree. And I think nothing replaces the opportunity to go to a university, learn skills beyond the knowledge in the classroom: social skills, self-responsibility, time management. But I think one needs to be really mindful of the return on investment. If you're spending $40,000 or $50,000 a year and you're going to come out of school with 100,000 in debt, perhaps another alternative is try community college first for 2 years and then transfer. But I think a good university education is great. It will never provide all those salient character, career building opportunities, maturity that you'll get by attending a university. But virtual now, or a certificate, or even an online degree program, if you're working full time, it's awesome. Be it a University of Phoenix or any of those free courses like Coursera is a great opportunity. You can actually go to probably over 100 universities and colleges in the US and take a variety of different classes, from accounting, business, life sciences. You may not get credit. You can pay $50 to get a certificate, but you can get a good education online depending on what your area of focus is.
It's amazing what some of these course providers are offering nowadays. But I think I tend to agree with your perspective that there's this different dimension that's offered through the post-secondary experience for people that have the the privilege to be able to go and have that experience, whether it be through taking on debt or if they have the money to pay for it themselves. I was listening to a talk from Mark Andreessen the other day, and he was sort of talking about these other dimensions that the university experience provides. Like in some sense, it offers a dating service for people. It's like a physical version of Tinder. It's this whole social experiment, this process of like social exposure that people haven't been through at a young age, and there's real development to be had there. And that's kind of what a lot of these online course providers are lacking, maybe intentionally or unintentionally. Maybe they just haven't been able to replicate it yet, but you can't really get that. What you do get, and maybe what they're really competing with, is just the substance. You can learn this skill. You can learn how to program online without going to school, but you're not going to get these other sort of tangible things that you get through actually going and having the college or university experience.
I think the cost model is broken, at least in the US. You shouldn't have to, go broke and be a slave to debt for 30 years just because you want a 4-year degree. And I think, much like the work from home now with COVID, organizations are rethinking, do we really need them to come in the office? Perhaps we just look at REI. They're selling their corporate headquarters in Seattle, and they're going to go to a regional pod base, sort of like a WeWork. You can go in, you'll have office support, but the vast preponderance of your time is you're going to work from home and remotely. If you need to go into the office, there'll be a local or regional center. And I think universities are going to have to deal with the cost issue, tenure, infrastructure, because the delivery models now with Zoom, and when we get 5G, I mean, the pipe is this fat now. When 5G happens, it's going to explode whenever that happens. And that's just going to enhance the online learning experience.
I'd like to turn it back to your story a little bit, because there are some things that I'd like to get into. You went to school, started your career in sales, and then you made a decision to go out on your own, to start your own company. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to that decision?
Sure. I was a sales executive with IBM, and I remember distinctly my brother-in-law, Dave Bratch, said, when I said I'm leaving IBM with a salary, benefits, insurance, and expense account, he said, "You're going to leave all that to go speak and train?" And that was right before 9/11. So it I had been training on a very part-time basis. I would take vacation days, work nights and weekends to build this business. But until you have both feet in your profession, in my business, it really didn't take on a life of itself. I was sort of in and out. But when you've got to make payroll, when you've got to pay your insurance, it takes on a new area of focus. And that was the scariest yet the most important decision professionally I ever made, was starting my own business. I just always loved training. I love speaking, and that's how I started doing sales training and motivational speaking and leadership speaking.
Where did the love of speaking come from? We sort of talked about humor at the beginning of this. I noticed in your background that you did a course at the Second City in comedy, and through watching some of your talks, in our first conversation, you struck me as a very sort of like business focused, quite serious um, guy. And then I watched these talks, and you just had the crowds in complete hysterics. And it seems to be a real core component of public speaking. Did the love for public speaking come from a love for comedy, or did they sort of happen to just meet at some point? How did this all start?
Sure. So actually, it was a gentleman from Toronto. I was a regional VP for Boca Research in Toronto. We had Comdex back in the early 80s, the largest computer show in Toronto. I had to hire some talent. So I hired this improv actor who did some work around the booth for us. And he was brilliant. We became friends. And he said, Doug, you're a funny guy, but you've got some skills there. Why don't you get some professional training? So I went to Second City. Obviously, Toronto has a storied group of actors, from John Candy to Dan Aykroyd, Gilda Radner, and I've been to that Second City, Toronto. It's great. So I went to their 2-year program, creative expression through improvisation, and it was a big commitment, but it really, and I didn't go to become a professional improviser. I went to provide another sort of explore that inner voice of humor that I had. And when I got that professional training coupled with my selling and presentation skills, it really was not planned. It came together. It was very organic. And that's, I would say, one of the starting blocks to building a successful speaking career. And I think humor has to be fresh. It has to be safe. It has to be inclusive. It doesn't tear down, it builds up. And some of the easiest place to go is the gutter and a 4-letter expletive. I'm talking about clean, intelligent, inclusive humor. And that just, I think today, there's such a lack of it, that when you can bring that to a presentation, or you can be self-deprecating, it really makes people feel safe. And when they feel safe and it's good content, they engage.
Yeah, it's amazing what a laugh can do for a presentation. As soon as I've been to the Second City, I'm actually here in Toronto. My partner's brother has quit his job. He's trying to become a full-time comedian, actually, and he's been through a program at Second City, and we went and watched the sort of performance for this cohort, and it was a blast. And not only in a comedy show, but in any show, as soon as, for me personally, as soon as someone can generate an organic laugh, I'm interested. I'm focused. And it seems to me that is something that makes you a really great public speaker. If you can get the people to laugh, they sort of go, okay, I'm listening now. This guy
Right.
has me. And then you can kind of talk about the business stuff, which might be perceived as a little bit more dry, but you've got their attention, and that's critically important. For the talks that you do, how do you think about what makes a successful talk? When you walk off the stage or the engagement's finished, what do you look back on to sort of say, that went well, or maybe it could have gone a little bit better? Is it just the reaction of the crowd? What do you look for to sort of determine whether or not you've delivered a successful talk?
Well, the best definition of luck is where, was Doug's presentation was awesome, he's lucky. No, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And Winston Churchill, for every minute of speech, he had a minimum of an hour preparation. So it's preparing, it's the pre-program work to reach out to executives, do research, understand their business, understand the key phrases, so that it's just not a suit up, show up, and throw up the same old presentation. So customization, good content, relevance, and how do I know it's good? You just know. Just like your partner's brother, he's probably hit the ball out of the park on a set, and he's probably dived on a couple. But you just know. But the preparation, and the most important thing, it's not about me. It's about them. And what can I do to add value? And I say, if I can get them to have 3 or 4 aha experiences where it makes aha, that is an interesting idea or concept. They internalize it mentally, emotionally, and then they go try it and execute it physically after the presentation.
That's really interesting. You know, I think we live in a world now where people constantly look to data to try and validate the things that they're doing. It's like, well, you show me the numbers, but in some cases, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You know when a joke lands because you get the reaction. You can't force that stuff. And you know, believe me, I've been in the room several times when not just this guy that I know who's trying comedy, but the other peers that he's presenting with when they bomb. You know, it's evident people don't laugh and it gets uncomfortable. But if you get people engaged, it's palpable. You can see that they're interested in what you're talking about. And I mean, that must be a great feeling standing on the stage, because you realize
It's a great feeling. And to your earlier point, Graham, we're in such a data-driven world, and the beauty of selling is it's selling business acumen, it's data points, sure, but it's part art and science. And we're so data-driven, and sometimes we forget, what it's like to interact with another human being and just establish a relationship, because the two things that are required to start before you start selling: establish trust and rapport. And data can't do that. Humans do that.
I think that's a great segue for maybe my last question for you here, Doug. I want to be mindful of time, but the reason that we met is because you've used Acadium as a mentor, and we got talking, decided to have you on the podcast. One thing that I think could be really helpful to maybe a prospective apprentice who's listening is some advice from you on what you'd like to see from an apprentice who's showing up on their first day. And this doesn't have to be an apprentice on Acadium. It could be an intern, any new hire who is maybe lacking in experience, and their primary goal is to learn. They're coming here to learn sales or marketing. What would you look for in that person on their first day to sort of indicate to you that this person has success, has potential? They're probably going to be successful here.
Well, Graham, it even starts before the first day. So, you know that there's an old adage in business, especially in HR: what's the true cost of a bad hire? The damage that they can do, not only to the culture, to other team members, but the hard cost. I take that to Acadium and to the onboarding and interview process of apprentices. I would say, apprentices, who you are speaks so loudly, of course I can't hear what you're saying. What I mean by that: if we have a scheduled phone call, Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock, and you show up at 10:10, that's strike one. If we communicate via email and you misspell my name, there's grammatical errors, that is telling me more about you than what your CV has. If there are huge gaps, inconsistencies, or lies in their CV or resume or experience, that's another. And then we do a vetting process online. If their social media is with a can of beer, a bottle of Jack Daniels, and shirtless, probably not a good fit. So we do that, but singular. So I would say to the apprentices, be sure you suit up and show up with excellence, on time, and all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, because that's how they make a very, very deep and permanent impression. in the first 7 seconds of any interaction, be it live or via email or your social media, 11 impressions, up to 11 impressions can be formed. You don't get a second chance to make a positive first impression. So I would say, apprentices, make sure everything makes sense, tell the truth, be on time, and look good. And then it's the interpersonal, how they communicate on the phone. If we do a Zoom meeting for all our apprentices, and we're probably on our 6th apprentice now, we've had a great experience with Acadium. We had great experiences with other US-based universities, but the paperwork was arduous, working with Office of Career Placement. There would be a change in the leadership. We'd have to go back to zero. It was wonderful, but it was a pain. Yours is easy to use. The Acadium website technology, your process is seamless. So that makes it really easy on us. And then I would say to employers is, before you hire, do everything I ask, vet them, get 3 personal and professional references, contact them, ask the apprentice, take a look at my business. We're looking at you for specifically video and content. Show me a couple of your university papers. Show me your latest PowerPoint. Get some data, some work effort to see what kind of work they produce. And then for employers, I would say this is what we do. It's one of the best hiring tools that I've learned in my career. I say, I'd like you to do the last step in our hiring process. I need you to make a 5-minute or less video using your mobile phone. Doesn't have to be Star Wars, Lucas, or Disney, and just answer 2 questions. Why should we hire you? And why do you want to come to work for the Sales Coaching Institute? Most 50% don't do it. That tells me a lot about them. And some are so brilliant and creative. So that's what I would say to the apprentices and organizations. And I would just say, if you haven't used Acadium, use it. It's a wonderful tool. And we have found wonderful candidates from Canada to Eastern Europe to the US that have just been really great, solid young people with skills that are looking for a place to be relevant.
Doug, I really appreciate the advice for the apprentices, the advice for the mentors, and the positive feedback for us. That really does mean a lot. And I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. This was a fun conversation, and I'm glad that you were able to join me.
Thanks, Graham. And I'll just offer up to any Acadium apprentice, or as we discussed, when I went to my first sales and motivational training at 21 in Chicago, Illinois in 1982, it was a program by Dan McBride and Associates. And it was a public workshop, and on the seat was the book that changed my life, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. I've subsequently taken As a Man Thinketh, and with a female speaker and trainer of mine, Christine Corelli, we've created 2 books, As a Man Thinketh and As a Woman Thinketh. And I've given that to you, and I offer that as a free gift for any of the Acadium team members or apprentices. So thank you all very much. Good luck and good selling.
Thank you so much, Doug.